I'm Julian Minnesone, and the Titans are taking on the Texans. Seems like the perfect game to get back on track.
I'm Tyler Rowland, and I'm here to tell you that the offensive line should give you more hope than you may realize.
I'm Brad Hopkins, and I didn't even see that iceberg that we hit. I didn't know we were on the Titanic.
Tighten up. It's the Titans Squad. Everything Tennessee Titans, every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Music City, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Squad up. The Titans Squad Show starts now.
And welcome to the Titans Squad Shows. You heard off the top right there. I'm Julian Minnesone, joined by my friends Brad Hopkins and Tyler Rowland. Got a jam-packed show, a lot to talk about when it comes to the Tennessee Titans for you today. A lot to get to. Of course, the Titans falling to 0-3 on the year following the loss to the Colts on Sunday. Just wanted to remind you that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Okay, fellas, so the sky seems to be falling in Music City right now as the Titans are falling to 0-3. Wanted to start off this episode with the tighten up and tighten down, even though there may be more tighten down things to talk about than tighten up. But we'll start with tighten up. And I know, Tyler, you kind of teased it off the top there. What are some of the things that maybe you're a positive about, even despite the 0-3 start right now?
Look, we got to look at the left side of the offensive line. I was as critical of the Dan Moore signing as anyone. We talked about it in the last squad show. You're taking a major risk. But Dan Moore was excellent in that game against the Colts. And look, that matches up with the scouting report. Against average to below average edge rushers, Dan Moore is going to win. Against great edge rushers, Dan Moore is going to lose. But the Titans are going to have a major problem on their hands if that isn't true, and Dan Moore loses against average to below average guys too. But he stepped up, he bowed his neck, he had a great game against the Indianapolis Colts. And Peter Skoronski right now is the best pass blocking guard and might be the best guard in the NFL through 3 weeks. And that's with all of the other crap that's happening on the offensive line. I know that it's hard for some fans to maybe process that two Titans offensive linemen are playing good football, or that one of the Titans offensive linemen is maybe the best in the NFL right now. Like, how can that be possible with the production of the overall group? But I think looking at the performance of Peter Skoronski through 3 games, looking at what Dan Moore was able to do last week, and then looking at J.C. Latham potentially getting back this week, Lloyd Cushenberry's coming back from a serious injury. It's not like, he's 150 pounds or whatever. That's a 300-pound man coming off an Achilles tear. That's tough right there. So I think Cushenberry stands to get better only logically. I think the Titans are going to get their starters back on the right side of the offensive line with Latham most importantly. And then with Skoronski at the level he's at and Dan Moore showing that he can be a good, positive player in some games, I think that's incredibly encouraging for Titans fans. And right now, you're right. The sky is falling, Chicken Little, but I think this offensive line is going to be massively improved at some point during the season, and I think it happens sooner rather than later.
I want to start by saying, talking about people who are struggling is hard. So my approach in talking about the issues that exist is simply stating the matters without conjecture. It's okay to say a team has too many penalties. These are facts, and facts are a stubborn thing. It's okay to ask how prepared you are during the week. The question gets answered at the end of the week. The Titans have played well at times, but not long enough, basically, to put together a complete game on both sides of the football. And it's not like this team is playing lights out on one side and carrying the other. I mean, hell, Jonathan Taylor had ran for 102 yards and 3 touchdowns. And we were talking about Michael Pittman Jr. and him saying that, hey, we were like, they don't want to play today. I mean, that's a sign that they saw. Obviously, Daniel Jones, his comments, when you hear that, that sense that you try and take advantage of that, when they're doing stuff like that. So positives, Cam led the Titans on a 13-play drive, 73 yards. Obviously, Tony Pollard capped it off with a 1-yard touchdown run. They had another 16-play drive for 77 yards. And Alec Ayumanner has his 2nd touchdown of the season. And the Titans only had 8 penalties. I know it sounds crazy, but only 8 at this point from what they started out in the first couple of weeks. That's a bright spot.
All wins.
We're going down. We're going down. 13, 10, 8.
Right, exactly. The Colts only had 32 more passing yards, but they outrushed the Titans 137 yards to 86 yards. Now, 2-2 in the red zone, I'll take that. You need to get more red zone opportunities, but the Colts are only 2-4 in the red zone. and the Titans only had 1 turnover. That's a bright spot. So, they also held the ball for 2 minutes and 30 seconds more than the Colts did. And I like the fact that, once again, we have an emerging receiver that no one's talking about in the Alec Ayu manner. And it seems like he might be the guy that has the best chemistry with Cam Ward right now. We'll see if now they can engage the superstars to play alongside of those guys that we're now starting to find those diamonds in the rough.
Yeah, I was just going to say, building off of that, B-Hop, at least if there's a tighten up, it seems like the Mike Borgonzi draft class is promising, right? Cam Ward obviously has all the talent in the world from what it seems. Iomatter has been your most consistent receiver, and that connection with Cam Ward seems to be working out. And then, of course, Chim Dike has been a revelation in the return game. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. And while it's great to have a draft class that does look promising and making impact plays, doesn't it feel like the rookies are kind of leading the vets along instead of the other way around? I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy to think about that, but it should be the vets leading the rookies. And it seems like all the impact, or most of the more memorable impact plays, have come from a rookie this season. What do you guys think?
I have a great example of that. And it's not maybe from the season, it's from the interviews. The fans were booing mercifully during halftime, and the players were asked about it. And Jeffrey Simmons said, don't boo. These fans shouldn't boo us. Boo, 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 boo. And then Cam Ward said, yeah, I mean, we're not putting a good product on the field. They have a right to boo. We need to play better. And I think one of those answers is the right answer, and one of them's the wrong answer. And the right answer came from a rookie, and the wrong answer came from a vet who's been on this team longer than anybody else except Amani Hooker. So I think you're 100% right about that. And I would go back to say that the Titans emphasize culture with this draft. They told us. I'm not making it up. They told us over and over and over again, we want culture fits. We need to, fix the locker room. We need to have players leading. Brian Callahan said it. We need players not just leading by example. We need players to bring other guys along with them. So I think if you put a couple of things, I love connecting dots. That's one of my favorite things to do. If you look at what they told us, hey, we need a better culture. We need more leadership in the locker room. Well, that probably means that the veterans you had in the locker room maybe weren't the best leaders. And we've seen Paul Kaharski talk about how Jeffrey Simmons handles things. He's attacked, media people on the sideline and had to be escorted out of practice. I just don't think the Titans have a lot of great veteran leaders. I think we're seeing that play out, and I think the reason they drafted some of these rookies is because they are good leaders, and they're going to be the leaders of the future when the Titans don't really have some. So maybe I'm connecting too much. Maybe I'm looking too deep into it, but that's kind of my read there. It's not a surprise based on what they told us all offseason.
Yeah, there are no outstanding, extraordinary veterans that basically warrant the kind of leadership in the locker room that they would inherit. You know what I'm saying? They're not like guys that have been on this franchise for years and have all of a sudden just stepped into those roles because of them putting the time in being a part of this team. They've had to come in, from different places. And who they brought in just aren't those megawatt personalities that all of a sudden say, I'm commanding the locker room. This is my locker room. But what they have done is drafted guys like that. So those young players that you're mentioning, Julian, they're just naturally in those positions because that's what the Titans have acquired in talent, to be in those positions. Name someone that's outspoken other than Jeffrey Simmons as a veteran. There just isn't. So the fact that you have young players that at some point are trying to take that leadership role, it's just natural if you think about it because of how the Titans have compiled this team with a lot of young players that even through injury have had to see the field sooner than later. So it doesn't surprise me that you don't have there's not a guy that's been on this team for 10, 11, 12 years, and all of a sudden this is his locker room, and rookies have to get in and fall in line with that. What veteran left Cam Ward the template on how to lead this team? There really wasn't one, so he had to kind of make one. Now, what they did do is draft a guy with a personality to be able to handle those measures, and that was because of his background, having to come such a long distance to get where he's at right now, kind of like, he took the long way home for sure to get to the National Football League and be the first pick of the draft. But I think it was that tale in itself that put him in a position of being a leader. But there wasn't somebody that handed him the keys to the throne, basically. The keys to the car or the whatever to the throne. So I don't think it's a surprise that you see young guys that are more outspoken than veterans at this point. And I'm not taking a shot at Jeffrey Simmons, but Jeffrey Simmons shouldn't be the voice of your franchise. When is the last time you've seen an interior defensive lineman be the spokesperson for a team? It just don't happen. So I'm not saying that isn't qualified to do it because he's been on the team, probably one of the longer tenured veterans. Yeah. But it's just, that voice that you want to hear that represents and speaks for everybody is supposed to be the quarterback, right? Well, it just happens to be that ours is a rookie.
Yeah. What are you guys as far as tighten down right now? If you could pick one thing.
Still only got 2 sacks, giving up 15 sacks. I mean, that's not the balanced ratio for a good team. Jeffrey Simmons and Amani Hooker have each gotten the quarterbacks this season, but they're 0-3, having lost the last 9 straight, going back to last season. 3 touchdowns through 3 games. That's not very productive. It's not a very productive offense. 2 through the air. Obviously, we got the 1 on the ground. Cam has a 71.4 passer rating. He's ranked 24th in passing for those QBs that have played at least 3 games. And the team's best tackler is Cody Barton, and he's ranked 56th in total tackles so far this season. So when you look at Hooker and Simmons that are tied for 53rd or tied with 53 other players for 49th in sacks, that's not a good measure. So they need to improve on those statistics alone.
I'll drill down on an individual level. I mean, Calvin Ridley has been awful. And I went back through the tape yesterday trying to see, okay, is he getting open and the offense is just unhealthy and there's pressure on Cam. Maybe Cam's missing some guys, doing things like that. But Ridley got absolutely locked up by Charvarius Ward. And there was a route on the sideline, on the right sideline, where he ran a go route. And he was open. Cam Ward overthrew the pass. But just from watching the tape last year, I went back and watched the game against Detroit where Calvin Ridley had his best game of the season last year, and he is just not moving at the same speed that he moved last year. So I don't know if he's secretly banged up or his heart's not in it. He's stopping some routes early. There was a throw Cam Ward threw to him on the sideline on a comeback route towards the sideline, and I thought Calvin Ridley shut down his route early thinking he wasn't going to get the ball, and then he turned around and the ball was on his back shoulder, and I think he could make a play on it, and he just didn't. There's just something about Calvin, and maybe it's something behind the scenes, maybe it's something in his personal life. We can't know about any of that, but he just doesn't seem mentally locked in. He's not beating man coverage. He doesn't look as fast as he did. I can't personally explain why, but he is just not playing at the level that he was even playing at last year when you would think he would be more energized to play well.
Let me take a stab at that. I think it really comes down to chemistry and understanding exactly what Cam needs from you and Cam understanding what Calvin is running. Sure, there's designed routes that they're supposed to run and there's supposed to be positions that they're supposed to be on the field so Cam knows where to go with the football. But in essence, I think that they need time, which obviously is not a luxury for them, to have the same chemistry. Why does Calvin not know where Cam's going with the football? Because they're not on the same page. And Calvin doesn't run full speed because he's thinking. He's not comfortable and fluid with what they're doing. It's not like they've been doing this for like 2 or 3 years to say, hey, like when you look at Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, those two could probably run routes with their eyes closed and put the ball in the same place where it should be for Travis to make a catch with their eyes closed, because they have that kind of chemistry, they have that kind of understanding, that rapport with one another that allows them to function that way. This is still a work in progress between these two, Calvin Ridley and Cam Ward. Now, maybe Cam's having more chemistry or better chemistry with Alec Ayumatter because he's literally got more reps than he has with Calvin Ridley. That's just a fact. So that's why you see that connection being more fluid, because I think that while Alec is thinking, he still has more of an understanding of who Cam is and where he's going with the football than Calvin does at this point. Calvin can't move full speed unless he's completely comfortable with the plays that they're running and the chemistry with his quarterback, and they're just not there yet.
And to your point, Brad, obviously the rookie's coming in together, so there's more time throughout an off season with Alec than it was with Calvin Ridley, that's for sure. As far as tighten down for me, it's one thing to lose games, fellas, but it's another thing to just completely show up unprepared and not ready to play. Imagine if on this show we said, you know what, for the first 2 segments, we're going to give it our all, but then the 3rd and 4th segment, we're going to phone it in. I'd understand why viewers and listeners would be upset with us. And same reason I'd understand why fans are booing. It goes back to the undisciplined, unprepared, not ready to go. And then you have, like you mentioned at the top, players from other teams saying, yeah, they look like they weren't ready to play. And then you have players in your own locker room saying, yeah, we came out flat. I mean, you're 0-2 playing a divisional opponent, and a win gets you a game back of the division, and it's still early. How do you I just don't understand why this team continuously shows up unprepared, unready to play. And
Well, it's when you're 0-3, 0-2 going into last weekend, there's not a lot to be excited about. And it takes a unique person with a different kind of energy, despite the circumstances, to get this team saying, hey, look, hey, we can do this. Because their confidence has been shattered at this point. And it's not that the fans don't have a right to state the obvious. Like, this team isn't playing well. But when you don't have the support of the fan base, when you just basically have questions that are just surrounding this team, it's just hard for these guys to say, hey, look, the sun will come out tomorrow. There will be a brighter day. It takes a unique personality, someone to see through all these clouds and say, hey, man, we're almost there, because there's nothing really to be excited about for fans or for players alike, or for coaches for that matter. But there has to be some sort of breakthrough. There has to be some seminal moment where this team rallies around itself, discovers an identity. And in my opinion, fellas, they've got 3 weeks to do it. They got 3 weeks to do it because they're on the road for 3 straight games, which means they don't have the pressure of playing in front of fans that just booed their butt off the field last Sunday. You know what I mean? So there's opportunity for them to get things together, for them to, kind of circle the wagons in essence. I know we've heard that analogy so often, but that's true. When you're outmanned, when you're outgunned, when the enemy is coming and they're surrounding you, the only way to defend yourself is to circle those wagons, man, because that's the best line of defense. So they need to be at that point for a long time now. But they have to generate some sort of enthusiasm, some sort of excitement, some sort of, just a will to want to do it. And it's hard. I've been in those situations before, where you just you're thinking, man, this just really sucks and I don't want to be here. Think about how those guys feel driving into the facility every day. Oh my God, I got to answer these dumb questions about why we suck. I've got to, try and stare at this playbook and figure out what it is that I need to do to make this team better. They're not playing collectively as a team. And it's hard. It creates division. But the only way that they can actually get together and do something productive is to unify themselves. Now, what is it that's going to do that? I don't know. I'm not answering the question. I'm just asking the question.
Brad, I think the answer to that question is leadership. That you really struck a nerve with me in a good way when you said, the sun will come up. There was a phrase that my dad always told me growing up. I lost a game. I had a bad day at school, this and that. He said, the sun will rise tomorrow. The sun will rise tomorrow. And I would like to think that I've carried that attitude into my life, and that propels me forward with a positive attitude at all times because the sun will rise tomorrow. But the question is, in this sport, do you have somebody who will inspire that feeling? And right. I know we're going to talk about Brian Callahan in depth here in just a moment, but watching that game last night with the Detroit Lions, they get whooped in week 1 against the Packers, and the world's coming to an end, and they lost their coordinators, and you could see Dan Campbell in that locker room saying, I effing love you guys. What a win. We did it. Stay the course, blah, blah, blah. And go back and look at Dan Campbell's record as a head coach of the Detroit Lions at the beginning. It was bad. It was bad, but he inspired them. He led them through that darkness and made them believe that coming to work wasn't a waste of time. And I got to be honest with you, as here's a softball for you, Julian, but I don't know that Brian Callahan inspires that kind of confidence in a locker room. I don't know if he has the cachet and the pelts on the wall to inspire the guys to get through these tough times. Maybe he does, and we'll see it. You're right. The next 3 weeks, 3-game road trip, that's a test, but I just don't know if that's there. And what they need, what you're describing that they need, I just don't know if that's on the menu right now.
Might be the best thing for this team to be away from Nissan Stadium for a little bit, at least in the immediate, while they figure things out. Luke Skywalker had to go to Dagobah to become a Jedi, so there's that whole thing right there. All right, guys, so on the other side of the break, Tyler teased it a little bit. We're going to talk Brian Callahan, what the Titans need to do with him and the head coaching situation. I know a lot of fans are voicing their opinions on that. That's when the Titan Squad show returns. Keep it here. All right, caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee plus B vitamins and nutritions with 0 sugar and 0 crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You could take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. Maybe you like the fact that it's sugar-free. Maybe you like the fact that you can take it anywhere and how fast you feel the caffeine shot that you need. All great reasons to try it. enough with the boring, flavorless caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine flavor an upgrade with 5-Hour Energy Shots. Get your favorites, the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store online with www.5hourenergy.com on Amazon today. All right, fellas. So as we talked about it in the first segment, Titans were booed off the field. Brian Callahan, obviously, they're calling for his job right now. It seems like the hot seat is hotter than it's ever been, 3-17, dating back to last season. If you are the front office right now, what are you looking at right now? What are you saying about the head coaching situation and what you could potentially do here?
I mean, what are the legitimate options? Fire Brian Callahan, then what? Will that make them more consistent up front? Will that create more pressure on the quarterback? What they need to do is they need to get healthy as fast as they can. The right side of the O-line wasn't on the field last Sunday. It wasn't. Latham and Zeitler are dealing with stuff at this point, and they don't have the depth in the backfield that they wanted to have heading into this season. Tyjae Spears will be back soon enough, hopefully. T'Vondre Sweat hasn't been in the lineup. His absence makes life harder for the D-line. So, and also they got to make the plays that are there on both sides of the football. You know, getting QBs to the ground, catching big plays downfield, sustaining blocks that give runners lanes. Coaches have to find what works and exploit it till teams force them to change. You know, what can they do well, you know, to sustain drives and create momentum? You know, there's some indication in those 2 long drives that I mentioned earlier that the Titans had in the second half that there are some things that they do well, but is the answer cancel culture?
Listen, I understand that, but I think more than anything, one of the things that's hurting this team is game management decisions. You know, that sequence at the end of halftime where Brian Callahan just can't decide whether he wants to go for it on 4th down or kick a field goal, and the Colts call a timeout, and then you got to call a timeout because you still can't decide, and then you still take a delay a game because you're taking forever to make the decision. And it goes back to something we talked about the first couple of weeks of not getting the play call in. Brian Callahan admitted, I need to get the play call in faster to Cam Ward. So is he just paralysis by analysis, and he just can't make a decision in time? He just can't do it. You know what I mean? I think one of the things that's hurting this team the most is something that's easily correctable, and it's having a coach who is more confident, whether it works or it doesn't work. Make the decision and go with it. You know, like that. Yeah, that's what I really want.
It's collective, though. It's collective. They have headsets on for a reason.
Yeah.
Because they're communicating with each other. It's not like the rest of the coaching staff is just standing around there and they're all looking at Brian like, what are you going to do? He's having dialogue with his assistants. You know, what are you seeing up in the booth? What are you seeing from your position? What are you seeing from here? Now, that level of communication has to be sped up. So that way it's more efficient. Because we see coaches mouthing on their mouthpieces what? You know, what are the situations? What's the scenario? What do we need to be doing here? Because they're asking questions of the group that he's put together to help him coach. He's not doing it exclusively. He's doing it with the assistance of all of his guys. Now, how long is it taking him to get the message, to get the answer, and then give it to who needs to hear it? You know, that timeline needs to be sped up, because while he's sitting there asking his defensive coordinator, well, what do you think? Do we need to blitz? Or asking his offensive coordinator? Or, you know, just what are you seeing that I need to call? You see what I'm saying? Of course, down and distance, those kind of things, that they're like conventional wisdom of what you would do in those situations, right? But when you start looking at momentum and how to gain it, you know, he's listening to counsel from the guys he hired to help him do the job. So it's not like he's the only voice that's being heard out there. He's listening to his assistants. He's listening to his players sometimes, in essence. There's a lot of dialogue going on. And sometimes if you're just not a guy that's done that consistently or for long periods of time, you are leaning on more of those guys versus you just taking the bull by the horns and doing it yourself. You see what I'm saying? So
I do agree with that, but I would just say this, that I think the best way to make any decision, whether you're a CEO of a Fortune 500 business, whether you're a head coach of a football team, yeah, you do need to collect information from smart people, you know, like Caesar, you know, the parliament. I agree that that is the smartest way to make, not just unilaterally, we're doing this, but at the end of the day, the buck has to stop somewhere. And you do, as Brian Callahan, you got to be the guy who collects that information and ultimately says, all right, Everybody had their say. This is what we're doing. And I just think that I don't know if afraid is the right word, but he's just not willing to do that. At some point, you're the head coach. Yes, that's information. Yes, my players, my assistants, but they are all looking to you to make the final decision. And I just think that he is just incapable at this time of just making the decision. He's taking in too much information then. And he needs to just be like, all right, I get it. You said this, you said that, but we're doing this. Whether it works, it doesn't work, this is what we are doing. And I think the players can feel that he doesn't have the ability to just put his foot down and say, this is what we're going with, this is what we're doing. And at the end of the day, he hired all these people. So if the answer is all of these people are giving me bad information or too much information, well, you hired them. So I agree with you that it's not all on him and it's a collective, like we talked about with the play calling last week. Like, it's not like Brian Callahan's just like, it's my play calling, I'm making every call. Like, he does do it, but at some point the buck has to stop with somebody, and when you're the head coach, it's you. And I just feel like he's too bogged down in all the nonsense to make good in-game decisions, and that is a very correctable thing that isn't get better players, scheme up this. Well, it's a very simple make concise decisions during the game, and he has not done it through 3 weeks. So that's what you're not wrong, but I don't think that my point's wrong either. You know what I mean?
No, it's not wrong. Now, I will say this one thing I've noticed, and I've had a number of occasions to sit down and talk with Brian one-on-one. And every time I've left those conversations, you know what I said? God, he's a nice guy.
He is nice.
He's a very nice
He's too
guy.
nice to be a leader. He's too nice to be a leader.
That's almost to a fault.
Yes.
He needs to be a ick sometimes. You know what I'm saying? He needs to be a guy to be like, what the like. Here's one example. Remember when Will Levis was trying to throw the ball out of bounds and he threw the pick, and he's looking at him like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like, I want a little more of that, because I want the players to be concerned about, I don't want to draw the ire of Brian Callahan, because right now he's such a sweet guy. You know what I mean? And a lot of times that works in communicating, because guys will play hard for people that they love. I will say that. But you got to also be able to have the fear in some of your players. And I'm not saying like be scared of them, but, we knew that Jeff Fisher, he could be wound tight sometimes. And if stuff wasn't going the way that it was supposed to go, he wasn't scared to get in your face and not only challenge you, but like, yell at you some. So I'm not saying he doesn't do those things, but whenever I left interactions with him, I'd always say, man, he's just such a nice guy. Just, sometimes I just want him to be a little scruffy. I want him to come pissed off. You know what I mean? I want someone to ask, hey, what's wrong with Brian? You see what I'm saying? Because most of the time, Julian, it's like,
Go ahead, Brad. Sorry.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Julian, I know you want to jump in, but I just want to say this. My guy, Nick Lombardi, on Twitter, who does some Titans content, he went back and found some blog stuff from after Bill Callahan was fired from Nebraska. And when you read through what fans in Nebraska were saying about Bill Callahan and why he was ousted, some of it is eerily similar to what we're talking about with Brian Callahan. And I think the reality is some people's personalities are just not meant to be in the top chair. Like Brian Callahan is the mad scientist. Put him in a dark room alone, and he's going to tinker, and he's going to and he's going to, all right, well, I found this crazy answer, but Brian Callahan isn't the CEO at the end of the table to say, all right, thanks for that information, mad scientist. This is what's best for the company. Like at the end of the day, he's a nice guy. He's a very, very intelligent, transparent, smart guy, but I think he's more of the information gatherer to, hey, Brian, go do this research project for me and bring back the results, and then I'll make the decision on what we need to do based on those results. And that's what he did in Cincinnati. He wasn't the play caller. He wasn't the head coach. He was a tinkerer in the background to figure out how can we adjust the offense? How can we call different plays? Running out of shotgun isn't working. Let's go a little more under center. That was his role in Cincinnati, and he helped them adjust their offense throughout the season. But that guy, that tinkerer, that mad scientist isn't always fit to be the CEO of the company and make the big over the treetops decisions. So I know that that's a little squirrely of an analogy, but I really do think that Brian Callahan is the mad scientist who works best alone in the dark to get you answers. He's not the CEO who's at the press conference saying, this is what we're doing and inspiring confidence in the shareholders. And that's what the Titans are missing right now. And I just don't think that he has that in him. That's just where I'm at.
Some people, we've talked about it, some people are just better as coordinators than they are as head
Yes.
coaches. It's just a matter of fact. I mean, you take the press conference that he said yesterday, how, hey, I believe in this team. I believe in myself, but the decision making at the end of the first half would lend itself to believe otherwise. So the question then, does something need to change from an operations standpoint? Because I know people are asking, well, do you give up the play calling then? Do you give it to somebody else so you can focus more on that decision-making stuff and be concrete?
Yeah, but then what? What is his role? Is he a macro or a micro manager? Is he somebody that like Pete Carroll? Pete Carroll is 1,000 years old, and this guy be going over here looking at the offensive line, and he goes over and checks out the running backs, and he goes over and looks at the DBs, and he's looking at the special teams. I just don't see Brian having his hands in all those other things to not be in his role someone that's calling the plays. I think that he is more specifically designed to deal with the quarterbacks, to deal with their output, and then everything else has been delegated. So, yeah, I'm just not sure. And hold on a second, Tyler, why's it got to be a dark room, bro? Can the guy get a window or something? I mean, why's he be like Frankenstein? Putting together you know what I mean? But the point is, I think that, sometimes, what did that guy say in one of those war movies? I'm best served in the rear with the gear. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not saying that he can't be a head coach. It's just right now, I think that making those adjustments to be a good head coach has shown to be more of a daunting task than maybe he would even admit at this point. And unfortunately, man, as a head coach of the National Football League, you don't have a huge timetable to figure it out. And that's unfortunately, you're at the speed of light. You're supposed to get in there and change this team around. And this is a team that picked first in the draft, and they picked first for a reason, So you have to get rid of all those reasons that made you eligible for the first pick. And there's not a lot of time to be able to do that.
Heavy is the head, right? Heavy is the head that wears the crown. This is the burden of leadership is you get the criticism. When decisions are wrong, you get blamed. And here's the analogy I would use. I grew up on Colin Cowherd. That was my favorite media guy when I was a kid that kind of inspired me to want to do this stuff. And he's great with analogies. And I'd like to think that I have some good ones too. Taking play calling duties away from Brian Callahan. You guys ever worked in a kitchen? Maybe not. I've worked in a lot of kitchens in my life.
Long John Silver, bro.
Hey, my first job ever was a KFC Long John Silver's combo dog. So I know all about that. But imagine if you were working the burger station of a fast food restaurant. You had the fry station, you got the chicken station, you got the expediter who puts it all together and puts it out the window. You know what I mean? And they came over to you and said, hey, you're not making the burgers very well, but how about you just put the pickles on the sandwiches? Well, if you're just putting pickles on the sandwiches, why don't I just replace you entirely with someone who's going to make the burgers and put the pickles on the sandwiches? Like, you're right. He doesn't do enough outside of the offensive side of the ball. He lets Denard Wilson do whatever he wants on defense. He lets Bones Fossil do whatever he wants on special teams. Brian Callahan doesn't do enough to justify him keeping his job if he is not calling plays. So, again, I hate that idea. I hate when people act like that's a thing. I think he's just beat down and downtrodden. So he's like, yeah, we're considering everything. Like, sure, I might make a change. You know what I mean? Like, he's just down on his luck and trying to give people answers to get off his back a little bit, but it just doesn't make any sense to allow him to continue to run the burger station if all you want him to do is put pickles on the sandwich. Just fire him if you're going to take away that from him. It doesn't make any sense to me.
The one thing that can't happen, can't lose the locker room. And at the end of the half sequence, you lose trust in the guys, then you're done. So there is our segment on Brian Callahan. On the other side, we're going to talk about somebody who maybe fans are maybe a little bit more positive about, and that's, of course, quarterback Cam Ward, what we like from him and what we hope to see from him when he goes on his first longer NFL road trip to 3 straight games. That's when the Titan Squad show returns. Keep it here. All right, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because it fits however you like. You know, you can bet player props, building same-game parlays, or even jumping in as the live action unfolds and do some live betting. That's also fun. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, fellas. So Cam Ward makes his first big rookie mistake of his career, I would say. Throwing the interception on the opening drive. It was a pick six, kind of set the tone for how the day was going to go against Indianapolis. What did you make of Cam Ward's performance, and particularly how he bounced back after that?
You know, I was looking at the comments, and Chad Kuba said it a while ago. He said, give me the best offensive line in football, and I don't care who my quarterback or running back is. Those are facts. I mean, it's probably the least talked about position unless they're screwing up, but it's probably the most important position because it is what dictates how a guy does his job. If you think about it, when Cam has time in the pocket, is he an accurate thrower? Yes. When Cam has time in the pocket, can he find the ways to exploit a defense? Sure. It also works conversely in the run game being a balance of that. If they're winning up front, then guess who else is winning? Tony Pollard's winning. Julius Chestnut's winning. I think Tajay Spears, when he gets healthy, he'll be winning. But if you don't have the big bodies up front, now, admittedly, health has been an issue. You know, we didn't have Lloyd Cushenberry in the lineup. J.C. Latham's not in the lineup. Kevin Zeiler wasn't in the lineup. So you had almost 2/3 of the offensive line that were in there. And not every one of those players that is filling in is a starter in the National Football League. And guess who knows that? The teams they're playing. So at the end of the day, we're asking about Cam Ward's performance. Cam is only as good as the guys around him. Does he have the intangibles to be a good quarterback? Of course. That's why he was taken first in the draft, because he was the best quarterback available. And I don't think that there's been a question about that, because we've seen some brilliant play by this young man when he has time. But if you put any quarterback back there with no time, even the great Patrick Mahomes himself, why didn't he win last year's Super Bowl? Because his line sucked. Period. And why did Julian Hurts win the Super Bowl? Jalen Hurts? Because he had a great offensive line. So it really comes down to those big bodies up front that mash and protect. It's as simple as that. Football is not a very complex sport until you make it a complex sport. And this is really about balling this thing up and hitting the guy in the mouth as many times as he'll take it until he quits. That's what it comes down to. And we just don't have those Jimmys and Joes consistently in the lineup.
I love that Brad is like, it's all about the offensive line. We're the important ones. Get us and you win. But you're kind of right.
That's
you're
your stubborn thing, bro.
Hey, I'm with you there. I will say this, though. While Cam Ward is going to be somewhat a product of his environment, Cam Ward can also help his environment. He can plant a couple trees. You know what I mean? There were some situations, I would say the last 2 sacks, and everybody wants to dog on the offensive line. Well, go back through all the sacks. About half of the sacks are Cam Ward holding the ball too long, Tony Pollard, Gunnar Helm missing their assignments. Only like half of the 15 sacks are actually an offensive lineman's fault if you go back and look through it. And in this game, 2 of the 3 sacks are Cam Ward holding on to the ball too long. One of the first sacks, or the third sack of the game, Alec Iomaner's running a drag route. It's 3rd and 8 or whatever. He's 5 yards deep. You get him the ball quickly. He may make a guy miss, get a first down. The second sack, you know, Cam Ward's just waiting, and he could hit Chikakonkwo short on a 2-man concept on the right side of the field, but he's waiting for Calvin Ridley on the deep dig because he's big game hunting because they're down so much, and he's trying to make a play that's a little bit better than a 5-yard, because we talked about those long drives they went on, but the reason that they were able to go on those long drives is because the Colts were dropping back, and they're like, we're not going to give you any explosive plays. Sure, take your 5-6 yards at a time. Perfectly fine with that. Those are why those drives were so long and they made some plays and stuff, is because that's what the Colts were allowing at the time. So I think if you go back through, this was Cam Ward's worst game of the 3. The pick 6 is a critical, massive error that you can't make. And then there were some of the sacks that he took that, quite frankly, weren't on the offensive line. It was Cam holding the ball too long. Now, the best part about it is, even with it being his worst performance, it was still an incredible performance. The hit to Calvin Ridley for 27 yards where he drills home the hook route. The hit to Alec Manor on the sideline. Some of those play action, smooth play, where he's play action and he's rolling out left and dumping it off to guys for big plays. Drilling that pass home for a touchdown to Manor in the red zone. Like, we saw the velocity. We saw the playmaking. It wasn't a terrible game for Cam Ward. But I would say some of the things that he made mistakes on are things that rookies are going to deal with. So it's not a terrible, it's his worst game, but the mistakes that he's making aren't incomprehensible. Oh no, this guy is not very good. It's, hey, you got to speed up. You got to learn when to just take your profit. And most rookie quarterbacks are going to have to learn those lessons at the NFL level.
Yeah. And also real quick, Julian, there is a combination of things, because if the quarterback feels he has somewhere to go with the football, he's not going to stand back there and hold it because he likes holding the football. He's going to get rid of it. So receivers got to get separation. They have to make themselves available for a catch. The offensive line has to give him enough time in the pocket to throw it. And those have to work in tandem. So it isn't, sure, I'm being tongue-in-cheek and saying that it's all about, up front, but there is an offense with 11 dudes on there for a reason. Cam has to be smart enough to see where he's going with the football, deliver an accurate pass. Receivers got to make themselves available to get that pass. Offensive line has to give him enough time. So it's got to be a connection, a conglomeration of things to allow him to do it. And, there has been time where he's seemingly had enough time to throw, right? Navigating the pocket in some instances. We saw Daniel Jones do a terrific job of navigating the pocket and throwing for first downs when the pass rush did get there at some points, creating that kind of pressure. But for the most part, there's got to be somewhere that he feels confident to go with the football, some big play type potential that, most defenses are starting to recognize and say, hey, look, this is where Cam wants to go with the football. Because, if you look at the pick six itself, it was very predictable what Cam was going to do. He went 1, 2, 3. Oh, here's the running back. Oh, shoot, there's a linebacker standing there. You see what I'm saying? So it's like they knew what his progression was going to be and how he was going to try and get the football out of his hands quick. Remember in preseason, I don't think he was holding the ball for 2 seconds, even without pressure. Dude was like 1, 2, 3, that back foot hit, and bam, he was going somewhere with it. You know what I mean? But nowadays, when you start having a game plan, when you start looking at how defenses are trying to confuse you and hide things and do these things that make you make those kind of mistakes, now that it's a different kind of situation.
This is why they say offensive linemen are the smartest position group. Brad just dropped a conglomeration on us in the middle of that one. There's the offensive line brain for you.
And I can spell it too.
Cookum.
We just got one of the funniest comments I've seen. Somebody with a Cam Ward burner as their name on YouTube said my pick six was scripted. That is hilarious. Make sure you guys keep the comments coming because we'll answer your questions throughout the show. But yeah, that's what this year is about, right? For Cam Ward, it's about inevitably there were going to be growing pains. There are going to be mistakes. You're going to throw him out there. He's seeing things he hasn't seen in his career. He's playing against some of the biggest, strongest, fastest defenders that you can ever face. One thing I forgot to mention in the last segment when we talk about Callahan, because I guess it relates to Cam Ward too. He is obviously this organization's best, most important asset that you have. And the Callahan decision, whatever you decide to do with him, is of course going to impact Cam Ward. What's going to benefit his development and his growth? Is it going to be keeping Callahan and fighting through the pain and growing pains and seeing what he can make of it? Or is it going to be starting over and starting fresh with somebody new? I will say this to the fans who have some hesitation about maybe getting a new head coach and starting something new. Cam has had different offensive coordinators and a different head coach each of his years in college, and he was still able to put up massive numbers and still able to win everywhere he's going. I know that's not the NFL level, but if you do have to start it off with a new head coach somewhere next season or even halfway through the year, let's say Bones Fossil takes over the interim job if Callahan does get fired, then you have at least that in your back pocket that Cam Ward has been able to have some success without a head or with a different guy at the helm each of his years in college.
Let me say this. If there was an immediate fix to what's going on with the Tennessee Titans and you felt that some new coach could come in and all of a sudden start implementing that, I would hope that Brian Callahan is smart enough to try and do some research and find out what those answers are. Like, what would a different dude do in these circumstances? Maybe start asking your peers around the league, hey, man, you see how we are 0-3. Can we get a cup of coffee? I need to talk with you about some of the things that you would do to make changes in the situation versus just floundering in your own mistakes or still trying to figure it out on your own and coming up with no answers. So I'm thinking if there was an immediate fix, if there was something that was so obvious to someone that could come in and all of a sudden make this team 3-0 for the next few weeks, why wouldn't you do the most that you could to try and find out what those answers are? I don't think that they that easily exist. It's not just like floating out there in the universe to answer those questions. I think it's a lot of different things that need to be addressed, and it might take them time to be able to figure out that, which obviously we've already stated they don't have, to be able to get it together. So I just don't think that the answer is basically outside of this building, in essence. I think that the answers exist within the building. They just have to do more communicating, they have to have more time with each other to understand what those things are and start working towards some sort of consistency. I just don't see someone that's not familiar with any of the players, any of the coaches, any of the system that's in, and is going to come in midstream and all of a sudden start just making wide-scale changes that they all of a sudden respond to and start winning. If it were that easy, then why is the guy at home? Why is the guy available to be a head coach in the first place? He should already have his own team somewhere if he's that good to be able to do it.
I just have two quick things, one on what Julian said and one on what you said. One, Julian, I think that at the end of the day, Cam Ward can get through any changes, but as I've said on this show before, I have a lot of relationship history. I've had a lot of dating and a lot of failed dating as well. And I will tell you this, staying with hey, listen, I didn't find the one for me until I was in my 30s. So listen, I'm not afraid to admit that my 20s was a disaster, a graveyard of dating in my 20s. But the point is, staying with the wrong person too long can be just as damaging as leaving too early. So, yeah, we want continuity for Cam, and Cam wants continuity and blah, blah, blah. But bad continuity can be just as bad as patience as well. You know what I mean? So you got to, and I would just say this, I don't think the answer may be outside the building, but if Bones Fossil can be the interim head coach, or Mike McCoy, a former NFL head coach, can be the interim head coach, and the Titans can get better decision-making and in-game management on Sundays, I think that would give a significant boost to this team's chances to win. I don't think it makes them a playoff team. We're not going to see the Ryan Tannehill run to the playoffs like we saw in 2019, but this football team has a win right now if they have a better head coach. They would have beaten Denver after forcing 4 turnovers if they had better in-game management and in-game decisions. Maybe you guys don't agree with that, but I firmly do believe that this team has a significant better chance to win on Sundays with a better head coach making better in-game decisions and managing situations better. I don't think the answer is outside right now, but I think that a guy like Bones Fossil or a former NFL head coach like Mike McCoy, I think those guys would make better in-game decisions, better than Brian Callahan's disaster before halftime, better than the management decisions we saw before halftime against the Broncos. I think those situations are direct examples of how this team would benefit from a better head coach. And I think the answers could be inside the building in John Fossil or in Mike McCoy as the interim head coach. And does it make the Titans a playoff team? No, but I think they're a much better football team than what we see because the coach is not making good in-game management decisions. And that's just my opinion.
Real quick, we got some irony. I mean, when you're young and things aren't going your way, a lot of times you look to your dad to kind of help you figure some stuff out, right?
Yeah.
Didn't Brian's dad have a head coaching job in the league?
He did. But he's going to, if they fire Callahan, he's going to go with him. Like, there's no way he's going to stay on staff.
I'm just saying. Asking questions. Remember, I talked about asking questions. But,
true.
Man, hey, Dad, what should we do? You know what I'm saying? Hey, Dad, how you change a flat tire? That kind of stuff, you know? So, I don't know. Just an observation.
Relationship advice from Tyler Rowland. You can't get anywhere else here in the Titans Squad Show. Okay, make sure you keep your comments and viewer questions coming in. We're going to answer them, as many as we can, on the other side of the break here at the Titans Squad Show. And I'll also take a brief look at the matchup against the Houston Texans this week when the Titans Squad Show returns. All right, fellas. Titans open up a 3 straight road games with a matchup against the Texans on Sunday. Obviously, Houston also 0-3, both at the bottom of the division. Something's going to give this weekend, given how important this game usually is to ownership given the history of the Titans and Houston, all that stuff. The rivalry. This seems kind of like the perfect game to try to figure things out. I mean, last year, the only divisional game you won was this one in Houston. And Houston's not exactly setting the world on fire right now. Certainly struggling a little bit to start the year. How do you see this one, at least from an early bird's eye view, playing out?
You know, the Texans, like you just mentioned, they're obviously struggling to get their first win as well. The Titans are on the road for the next 3 weeks, which obviously, like we mentioned earlier, could be the best thing after this weekend's response from the fans. The pressure is on the Texans, guys, to beat a team that is yet to win a game, and they're at home. C.J. Stroud has the same amount of touchdowns that Cam has, 2. Stroud has only thrown for 93 more yards, basically. Tony Pollard has rushed for more yards than Nick Chubb. Will Anderson has more sacks himself than the Titans' entire defense. That's something to be, concerned about. But for the most part, this is one of those situations, guys, where the Titans, ironically enough, can just take a deep breath and go, no one expects us to win this game. So where does the pressure come? We're going on the road down to play a team that we've had some pretty good success against, and they are struggling. And guess what? Their fan base is just as disappointed in them as ours is of us. But the only difference is the Houston Texans were supposed to win the division. That's the difference. No one picked the Titans to win the division. So who has more pressure squarely on their shoulders? Ding dang Texans. And I would break out the Oiler uniforms and run through that tunnel and be like, hey, it doesn't matter. We're both 0-3 right now. The only guy coming out of this ring is the winner. And we'll see what happens. So there's a lot going on there. This weekend, it's going to tell us a lot, to say the least.
Somebody's going to get right. I mean, this is a get
right.
Somebody's
going to get right.
Somebody.
I love that.
Like, somebody has to win the game. You know what I mean? So, like, and I look at the Titans' pass rush has not been good, but the Texans' offensive line is stinky, and it's like by design. Why would you trade a top 5 left tackle when your offensive line isn't good and think that you're going to sign Cam Robinson and he's going to be an answer? You're going to draft a rookie and he's going to be an immediate answer. So I think that the offensive line of the Texans allows the Titans' pass rush to be better than they actually are, because the Colts have one of the best offensive lines in the entire NFL. Of course, it's going to be hard to get pressure on that with a bad pass rush group, but this Texans' offensive line is one of the worst. So it could allow the Titans' pass rush maybe to have more success than they've had. But on the other side, the Titans' offensive line, I said they're going to get better sooner than later, but I don't think it's this week, because Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, that defense, they are absolutely nasty. So it's all about, to me, which unit that has underperformed for the Titans so far, the pass rush or the offensive line, which of those can have a good game? Because if they both have a good game at the same time, the Titans are going to win this game. But if they don't, if only one has a good game or neither has a good game, then they're in trouble. I think this is a big answer game for the trenches. Can the Titans' offensive line, hopefully they get J.C. Latham back. I think Blake Hance can hold on at guard, even if Kevin Zeitler isn't ready to go. I think he can be all right. And the problem with the Texans is their edges are really good. So if you get J.C. Latham back and you have Dan Moore coming off a pretty good game and they can do a decent job, the Titans should be able to have some success, and then the Titans' defense should be even better than they've been recently, because they're not – the Denver Broncos have a really good offensive line. The Indianapolis Colts have an even better offensive line. The Texans don't. So that could allow the defense to get some pressure on the quarterback more than they have. Stroud is mobile enough, but he's not an overly mobile quarterback. This isn't – he isn't as mobile as Bo Nix or as mobile as Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. You know what I mean? Stroud ain't going to beat you like that. So this is a big opportunity for the Titans' pass rush to finally have a good game. And if they do that, I think it trickles down. And then the Titans' offensive line is really the big question that you got to look at.
I'm with you there, Tyler. A largely new Houston Texans offensive line. They allowed 8 sacks so far this season. That number needs to get well in the double digits after this game if the Titans are to come away with a win and steal one over there in Houston. Somebody in the chat asked a question about the offensive line. I can't seem to find it right now, but what they said basically was, if Zeitler, how much more improved will this offensive line be once Zeitler and Latham ultimately return, and maybe fix some of those problems that even if they're not healthy this week, against the Texans. Tyler mentioned how much of a problem it could be with the pass rushers that they have, but for the long term of the season.
Actually, there was two questions. Somebody else also why Bill Callahan's offensive line is playing better. Tyler, you on Twitter put up one of the plays, and it was a run that looked like a cutback, but the running back was on the right side of Cam Ward, and he led the handoff like it was going to the backside, but it was a front side run. They were blocking to the front side. That was a very telling play right there in itself, because I saw way more guys in the box to block than there were blockers to block them, which means that there's going to be some guys that are free. But when you look at it with 8 men in the box, then you should have been able to check to a pass play. You see what I'm saying? Because you had all these guys down in the box. You had the safety was down in the box. The linebackers were hovering above at the line of scrimmage. And what I saw was Dan Moore basically holding ground a little bit before he got into no man's land and didn't block anybody. And then the guy that he originally was blocking came down the line of scrimmage and made the tackle for a loss. It's those little things right there that they're playing discombobulated. So I bring that full circle to say, what if Zeitler does get in? Are those issues going to go away? The only way that those go away is by having time to work together. So they're still going to be working out kinks, even when the starters do get back in there, right? But you have to do it. All three of us were talking about our golf game at the beginning before the show started, right?
Or lack thereof.
What did we say lends to being a good golfer? You got to go do it. You got to put the time in repetitiously to be able to do it. And when you've got injuries, when you have guys that haven't played collectively together, then your game's going to look clunky. Just like if you only went golfing once a month or once every other couple of months or whatever. It don't work that way. So these guys still need time, even though when they do get healthy, to be able to put things together and play a complete game.
I need those runs to hit quicker, too. I am so sick of the slow developing run plays.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. That's the play you were talking about.
They got to hit quicker. Chim DK coming in orbit motion, and then we're doing a fake, and then we're turning it into a reverse. And Callahan struggled with those slow developing runs last time. And the reason that 51 was able to get down the line of scrimmage and get to it is because it took so long on the footwork for Tony Pollard in the backfield for that run to hit. We need to hit that right away, and then 51 won't even be able to chase from the backside. You know what I mean?
Right about that play, Tyler. Something wasn't right. Like I said,
yes.
Cam stepping to his right to hand the ball off to Tony Pollard, but the play was going to the right. Why is he cutting back at the handoff? It was just because then he ended up going to the front side in the first play. Anyway,
we're countering to the front side. We're running counter back to the side.
That play was so weird. I was like, you're talking about slow hitting. I'm like, I think it was just wrong. Either the quarterback was either the running back was on the wrong side. If you give him the handoff and he's already going to his right with the flow of the blocking, he can cut back on his own. But he was on the right already, and he handed the ball, but he's going to his left. It was like such a weird thing.
It made no sense for the tackle to squeeze down and cover the B gap and allow the C gap in when the running back is on the right side of the quarterback. And Brad, I see this stuff, and I know that maybe the players are making mistakes we can't know, but I see coaching because it's a pattern now. Consistently, there are missed assignments. Guys don't know where they're going. Think back to Denver where they run a wide receiver screen and nobody turns around to catch the screen. You know what I mean? Like they're just, if you look at each individual example, you could say, oh, maybe the player made a mistake. But I say this all the time. If every student fails the test, the teacher failed. If every student failed the test, it's the teacher that failed. And at some point, these missed mistakes, these strange looking plays that look like they're not set up correctly, at some point, each individual play you could say is a player, but the pattern has to be on coaching. And that's probably a great place to get towards the close of the show, as we just still have so many questions about the coaching.
Absolutely. I tell you this, one way to get back in the front office, good graces, particularly this front office, is to beat Houston on the road. So we'll see if they can do that. Titans got a road game against Houston on Sunday. We'll see you then. But for now, I'm Julian Minenson. That's Tyler Rowland. And, of course, Brad Hopkins. We'll see you guys on game day.